Welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the monthly live mineral webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University,
the Paris School of Mines,
and Blue Cap Productions. Tune in on the first Wednesday of every month and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to our first show of 2025. As you know, our mineral world is already into full gear-up mode for the annual Tucson show later this month and extending into February. So that will be exciting to see everyone in person again. I can't wait. And also for our February show, we'll be doing a live show directly from Blue Cap Productions studio in Tucson. So look forward to that. As for today's show, today is Wednesday, January 8th, and this is our 94th episode of Mineral Talks Live, your favorite mineral talk show on the internet. I'm your host, Brian Swoboda, and together with the rest of our bubbly and vivacious team, Dr. Raquel Alonso Perez from the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, and Dr. Eloise Gaillou from the Paris School of Mines, we want to welcome you to today's show. If you missed any of our past programs, you can always catch the rebroadcast on our Mineral Talks Live YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@Mineral Talks Live. And when you visit our YouTube page, remember to click the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever we post a new episode. Now, for those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show. Mineral Talks Live is a monthly mineral talk show that usually airs live on the first Wednesday of every month. Yes, I know today happens to be the second Wednesday of this month, simply because the first Wednesday was New Year's Day, and, well, you wouldn't have wanted to see us on that day. Our goal on this show has always been to connect you with other members of the mineral collecting community via our interviews with some of the best curators, collectors, dealers, miners, researchers, artists, and media people in the mineral world. Today, I'm coming to you live from the Blue Cap Productions headquarters in Honolulu, Hawaii, while Raquel is showing off her new, much shorter haircut straight from her office in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Eloise is sitting pretty directly from her home in Paris, France, with all the wonderful live plants behind her. Not like me, I've got the Lego plants. So this is truly an international show, and I believe this is the only mineral talk show that is a majority female-owned project. So thank you for supporting that. One of the other things that makes this program unique is not only is this a live show, but it's a show where you get to interact with our guests. To participate, all you have to do is to type your comments in the chat or the Q&A features, both of which are located at the bottom of your Zoom window. The chat feature allows you to instantly send messages to everyone watching the live show, so we encourage you to be as active as you'd like in the chat during the show. And while our guests and I generally don't see your messages during our conversation, throughout the show, both Raquel and Eloise will be monitoring the chat area and will be very active there. Occasionally, they may even interject a question or comment to us during the interview, so don't be shy if you want to ask something. Also, when you log in, we ask you to send a message to everyone, letting us know where you're tuning in from so we can see how far we're reaching around the world. If you happen to have a question directly for our guest, or maybe it's a bit more detailed or needs a bit of a longer answer, go ahead and use the Q&A feature and we'll get to those questions at the end of the show. Finally, towards the end of the program, you'll see a window pop up on your screen. This is our quick fire 5 question segment to see how well all of us know our guests. So test your knowledge, play along, and who knows, we may have a good icebreaker for you next time you see our guest in person, which should be at the Tucson show. So now, let's welcome today's guest. He's a postdoctoral fellow in minerals and earth sciences at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and he's the educational committee chair for the Young Mineral Collectors. That means he's both smart and young. And I'll tell you, after spending some time talking with him, Chris truly is a wonderful representation of the future of the mineral collecting hobby. He's got it all: especially when it comes to the passion for and the curiosity about minerals. So, welcome to our show, a man that has been described as a wickedly smart and fun dude, Dr. Chris Emproto. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Thank you so much for the really kind introduction, Brian. Uh, I'm so honored to be here as a guest on your show. I've seen a lot of Mineral Talk lives and yeah, just didn't think my day would come. So I'm really honored to be here.
Oh, Chris, it's our absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm really, really happy that I got a chance to meet you. We chatted a little bit yesterday, and like I said already, I'm totally impressed and can't wait to meet you in person. So I think you're going to be at Tucson just in time for the Harvard party. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I will be there from the 7th to the end of the show. So we're looking forward to seeing you and all my other mineral friends and making new ones, of course.
Dynamite. Well, looking forward to it. I know that you're working on some of the cases, the young mineral collectors cases that will be at the TGMS show. So if viewers out there, if you haven't run into Chris and it gets towards the end of the Tucson season, you know where you can find him at the TGMS at the Tucson Convention Center. He'll be around the YMC pod. So go up to Chris, talk to him, ask him about mineral names, and boy, buy him a sandwich because you're going to have a long conversation. Now, Chris, I always like to start my interviews by asking the same kind of general question about the origins of how people got involved. So what was it that got you interested in minerals and mineral collecting?
Yeah, so sorry about that. Our light is motion sensitive, and I guess I've been sitting still for a little too long. But my interest in minerals and really nature in general started further back than I can remember. I was always interested in science and nature before I even learned to read. And when I was learning to read, I really only wanted books about like science, like the metamorphosis of like frogs and about sea life or whatnot read to me. And then I was really interested in shells and also like history, like coins and like shark's teeth and whatnot, along with rocks and minerals. But over time, my interest in all these other things waned. And the more I learned about rocks and minerals, the more I really fell in love with it. And my curiosity just deepened. And then that led to me, of course, intensifying my mineral collecting, not just reading about them in every reference book I could get. And so I went from what a lot of people have, just bits and pieces from gift shops to like being a hawk on eBay, buying mineral species that I had read about in books and trying to get a sample.
So, Chris, sorry to interrupt. Tell me about the first mineral specimen that you ever acquired, either field collecting, finding on a walk, or buying at a mineral shop or mineral show or something.
So I think the first one that was a proper specimen and not just the tumbled piece of whatever was one of the Moroccan aragonite Sputniks. I think a lot of people know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I got one of those for a few bucks from a rock shop somewhere, and it wasn't my collection until maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, just kind of for sentimental reasons. But after that, I definitely got a lot of stuff from museum gift shops, and then slowly expanded into eBay, and didn't really go to a mineral show until college. So that's kind of where I was getting stuff.
Right on. So now you are 29. So you're 29 now. How old were you when you got that Moroccan piece?
So I must have been maybe like 7 or 8. It wasn't the first rock I ever got. The first rock I got, I remember exactly the moment. It was one of a carved onyx from the Scholastic Book Fair, and that was when I was in kindergarten, so I would have been 5 at that time. But the aragonite Sputnik, I think I was maybe 7 or 8. But really, by the time I was like 11 or 12, I had a real collection going on. So it definitely started early and then just intensified from there.
Now, is there anyone that you can credit with being a early influencer or mentor or someone who might have opened some doors to help you along that path?
Yeah, first and foremost, I got to say my dad and my mom is a collector too. She might not realize it, but my dad is definitely more of the stereotypical collector. He doesn't collect minerals or anything to do with science, but he builds and buys guitars and basses, and
Oh,
so
wow.
he's been lifelong music fanatic, just as much as I am into minerals. He is with music, like music history. Um, but yeah, he builds guitars and basses, and there were over 300 of them last time I counted. I had a mineral catalog going at the time in like college, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, you really should get one of these catalogs and just
Wait,
put what you
300
have."
in his collection?
Yeah, so that's where we got to, and where I kind of gave up because they were just it was just kind of getting hard to find the additional ones. So there are, to my knowledge, more than 300. And he also collects model cars
How
and
many
actual
houses
full-size cars.
how many houses do your parents have?
Oh, just one. We've got two basements though. That really helps.
Oh my God, that must be jam
Yeah,
packed with guitars and basses and model cars.
you wouldn't believe, Brian. But yes, my dad was a mentor to me just in with collecting in general, and that he always understood me with
Sure.
that. It wasn't like my parents were like, "Oh, what are you buying a rock for?" They were very supportive of my intellectual interests, buying me books, encouraging me to learn, taking me to museums. But they also just like got me in terms of why I wanted to collect, and they didn't balk at me wanting to get a rock with all of my holiday or birthday money off the internet, that may not have been stereotypically like beautiful. They just understood me that he's a collector and this is what he's passionate about. So I'm really grateful to my parents for that. So they were early, I suppose, mentors there. But to follow up with collecting mentors specifically, Steve Chamberlain was a huge collecting mentor that I got to know when I was an undergraduate at SUNY Oswego in New York. And I
Mm,
connected with him just to ask him questions about New York minerals because I was doing a undergraduate research project on that. And he's the guy for New York minerals. And he really taught me a lot about what makes a nice or important specimen. And it might not
right.
be something that you just necessarily look at and realize that there's aspects of like history that might make a specimen important. There's rarity. This might be the only example that was saved from this mine.
Sure.
This might be a rare habit or something. So he just gave me a much more holistic understanding of minerals, and still is a wonderful friend, and also was very generous. Gave me a lot of mineral specimens and shared his time with me. Took me to Carrabba's numerous times. So he's a great mineral mentor.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Now, okay, so as a young child, you got very interested in minerals, and that led to kind of a sort of I don't know, I guess I'd call it a mineral-based life for both your undergraduate and graduate education, which eventually led you to where you are now. Kind of give us an outline of that progress of how your interest or your passion in minerals turned into a clearly defined subject that you wanted to focus on in school and eventually led you to the Carnegie.
Yeah. So I was probably in high school when I decided, yes, I definitely want to go to school for geology. And at that time, I thought I
In
wanted to
high
be sort of
school.
like a mine geologist.
Sure.
And so, of course, I was really interested in minerals and where do a lot of cool minerals come from? Mines. And also,
Mhm.
I was interested in sort of the societal aspects of it. Mines are where we get a lot of really important materials. The computer that I'm using to talk to you right now would not be possible without minerals, like solar panels, electric vehicles. So that sort of motivated me in that, yeah, I can use my passion for something that's societally important, but also intellectually stimulating. So I went to school for geology at a small state school in New York called SUNY Oswego. It's
Mhm.
right on the shore of Lake Ontario, beautiful campus. It was very affordable. I got a good scholarship to go there. It was
Nice.
a small school, and they had a pretty good geology program, and I got a great education there. And I got a lot of good opportunities that I'd say a lot of students at similar size schools don't necessarily have. Like I had access to a couple of different instruments that are still really important to me. One of them is a scanning electron microscope that blew my mind, that made me be like, I have to do research. I have to keep knowing more. I was just so fascinated. And the other one was an X-ray diffractometer where I could really understand the minerals that were in my sample. And so I got access to those two things. And I was like, man, I really love this research thing. And I had also, throughout my bachelor's program, went from being interested in mining to being more interested in just research and really more fundamental questions about mineralogy. So
Okay.
at that point, graduate school was sort of inevitable. And then I decided to just kind of, I didn't really know what I was doing for graduate school. So I applied to a number of different schools that I just did research on, and they kind of just came up in searches. But luckily I was connected with John Rackavan at Miami
John's a
University. He
great
was in
guy.
at Miami University. Yeah, he was a wonderful, wonderful mentor, just emanates knowledge constantly. So that was really a turning point for just the way I think about minerals. I mean, before then, I had the interest, I had the passion, but in order to just like take that to the next level and just be able to learn and pursue questions that you won't find an answer in any book, things that no one knows, that maybe questions no one asked before, you need a really good foundation in mineralogy. And I'm really grateful to have gotten that from John.
Right.
And so, yeah, I got to do some really interesting research there on just the massive apatite crystals that are common in the crustal carbonatites in Ontario and Quebec. I believe you have a couple of photos of that are relevant to that.
What
But
photos am I looking for here?
there should be one of me in a trench, and then there should be another one of some giant apatites on a
Okay. I think
wall.
is this the,
Yep.
okay. What are we looking at here?
So that's not a dead body. That is me digging into one of these crustal
Oh,
carbonatites in Ontario. And so these are big bodies of calcite that have other minerals in them, and the calcite dissolves from the acid in the soil, and the other minerals don't. And so you just basically get this trench that goes down, hopefully, pretty far, because that means there's going to be a lot of crystals at the bottom. And then when you get to the bottom, you could just be pulling out giant crystals for days. And so that's what I was doing right now, or right there, is pulling out some nice apatite crystals. But yeah, that was for field work for my master's thesis, which was pretty awesome. There should be another photo that shows some of the giant. Yeah, that's a historical specimen that I got to sample for my master's thesis. That is more than 500-pound single crystal of fluorapatite from the Emerald mine in Quebec. It's currently in the back room at the Canadian Museum of Nature.
nice.
So
And then I
yeah,
don't know if
that was awesome. So
I
this is my
don't.
current field work.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Is I don't know where
oh,
this is.
this is when I was a master's student. This is a really fun field trip we took to New Mexico. So that wasn't for research, but I did get some very interesting mineral specimens there. So
Okay.
back to the education though. So after I was like getting to the end of my master's thesis, I decided I really wanted to pursue this idea of like minerals for our future. So what are the minerals that we need for like solar panels, battery electric vehicles, like laptop batteries? Like what minerals do we need for a low carbon energy technology. And so that's why I applied to the University of Michigan. By this time, I was much more experienced looking for graduate school, so I was able to narrow down my search. And instead of just getting very lucky the first time that I was able to connect with a super advisor, this time I actually kind of knew, okay, this is the sort of program I'm looking for a PhD. So my advisor specialized in mineral resources for renewable energy technology.
Okay.
And specifically, we look at chemical signatures called like isotope signatures, just different varieties of elements of the same element that have different masses. And so natural processes will separate these. And so if we learn how to read those different signatures, then we can understand what the processes are that may have formed a mineral deposit. And then we'll get better at looking for them. We'll get better at mining them. So that's the whole idea there. Just because the days are gone where you can kind of just walk along the surface of the earth and find like a rich gold vein or really great lithium mineralization or whatnot. We got to get a little bit more creative now.
So basically, if you find like a certain isotope, you can track back because of the research, you can track back and figure out the general area where the origin of that might have been formed. And because of that, other associated minerals. Am I understanding that correctly?
Really close. So we look at these isotope ratios, which is just like a ratio of like the heavy isotopes versus the light isotopes. And there are some certain processes. So for example, like all natural igneous rocks, for the most part, fall in a pretty narrow range of iron isotope values. And so if you're looking at a mineral deposit that has a lot of iron, and some of these mineral deposits, they're 1 or 2 billion years old. They've been metamorphosed several times. It can be really hard sometimes to even know if you're looking at something that used to be like molten rock or that was like deposited by hot fluids. It can be that hard to read some of these deposits just because they're so old. But the isotopes, that iron is still there regardless of if it changed form from one mineral to another. And so if we see that isotope ratio that says, hey, this could not possibly have been a magma, that isotope ratio is nowhere near that magmatic range, then we know the iron didn't come from a magma. So we use different signatures like that to understand the origin of like copper and iron deposits. And I also used some similar work, but with oxygen isotopes to look at lithium deposits.
Now,
and so,
first, let me ask you this. Can you give us a real world example of where what you just described happened that totally changed our perspective of a locale or the geological formation in the area?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a type of mineral deposit that my lab really specialized in, and they're called iron oxide copper gold deposits. Okay. Not many of them produce great mineral specimens, although I happen to have a really nice mineral specimen from one that I studied for my dissertation. This is chalcopyrite on calcite from the Ernest Henry copper gold deposit, which is in Western Queensland, Australia. That was one that we focused on that actually changed the way we think about these deposits. So they're found all over the world and in rocks of a lot of different ages. And some of the youngest and best preserved ones are in the Western Andes, because this is still a place where there's active subduction, there's active volcanism, and there are mineral deposits there that are still forming today. And so we've looked at, our lab, my predecessors, they'd looked at specifically, because I'd already mentioned them, iron isotopes in all of these different Andean deposits, and they are right in that magmatic range. So because we have all this, like that isotope evidence, plus the evidence of like, okay, we know this is a subduction zone, there's magmatism here, we know the current tectonic environment, it makes sense that this iron and therefore the other metals in this deposit came from a magma. But when we did that at Ernest Henry, almost none of the data fell within that magmatic range, even though it's the same type of deposit, there's a ton of iron there. And so it doesn't make sense that, oh, the iron isotope signature just got like overprinted or replaced, because you'd have to move around all that iron again, which didn't happen.
Okay.
So we know that iron in Ernest Henry, and we've expanded this to other nearby iron oxide copper gold systems in Australia, that iron did not come from a magma. And so what's really interesting is that when you look at one type of deposit, you want to think, okay, there's one hypothesis that would explain all of these, and then other little hypotheses that explain differences between them. So like some of our favorite mineral deposits are, for example, like copper porphyries. It's like Milpias. Collectors, like we all love Milpias, beautiful mineral specimens. There's a general porphyry model that makes sense and that you can apply to all these other porphyries, and the data fit that same general model. But saying that one of these came from a magma and this other one that's ostensibly the same type of deposit had nothing to do with a magma, it just means, like, is there really more than one completely different pathway to get to the same result, which is geologically really fascinating. So that changed the way that we think about these deposits.
Very interesting. So, okay. So that was kind of your graduate studies. Where did that, or how did that then lead to the Carnegie?
So the work that I do at the Carnegie is quite different to what I was doing for my PhD and master's. I still would like to continue doing research projects that are related to some of my previous work. But what I do right now is crystal structure determination, descriptions of new minerals. And I did some structure determination as a master's student, but I was just X-raying apatite over and over and over, and we were looking at subtle differences in the structure. Whereas now we're trying to solve entirely new crystal structures. Some of these have never been seen before. Some of them are related to known minerals. But it gets back to really one of my primary interests, or the primary questions that I have, and that's, why do we have so many minerals? How do we get the minerals that we have? What explains the variety of minerals that we have? And so understanding their chemistry and structure is crucial for that. And so I was really interested in getting back to that part, like determining crystal structures, looking at mineral chemistry, but then also incorporating what I learned in my PhD, like looking at the bigger picture. How did these things come together and make this mineral? But I'd gotten involved in new mineral descriptions as a PhD student. I was really lucky to connect with Jason Smith, who's got incredible eyes for rare minerals and new minerals, and he's discovered a lot of new ones just because he is so good at identifying minerals that when he can't identify it, there's a really good chance it's something interesting. So, yeah. And I'd helped him out. Yeah, he's one of a kind. I'd helped him out with figuring out the geology of this rather interesting little old lead mine in North Carolina, and I kind of used my knowledge, like the skills that I had gotten as a PhD student, just thinking, how do metals move? How do you look at the environment to understand, okay, what sort of mineral forming environment leads to what we see today? And because of that, I wrote contributions to new mineral descriptions, and we ended up, Jason ended up finding like 19 new minerals there. And so my contribution ended up getting expanded to apply to all of these 19 new minerals. And I got involved with new mineral descriptions there and wanted to keep doing that. I know Travis Olds here at the Carnegie, my boss, he's really involved in a lot of new mineral descriptions. He focuses more on uranium and vanadium minerals. So I just knew we had a shared interest. And also one of my biggest values is intellectual freedom. I'm inherently very curious about minerals. I want to be able to answer questions that are important to me. And getting to work here with Travis, I'm with someone who has similar questions to what I have, who's interested in similar things, but also encourages me to develop additional projects and branch out. I'm not just stuck in a very narrow lane, being told what to do, or where we have like a massive project that has very strict guidelines. I have a lot of freedom in the research that I get to pursue, and I really love that. So those were all very appealing things about working here. Also, I love mineral museums. I think they're very important for collectors and scientists and the public in general. So just really, it's the right environment. I really enjoy working with Travis. He's a great mentor. And Pittsburgh is actually a quite nice city to live in. So
that's awesome. I know Travis well, and I think he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. So to have him as a boss and to be of the mindset that you want the freedom to explore and the freedom to share, 100%, you're in the right place. So congratulations for being there. And I think it pays off for both you and the Carnegie. So now you've done a lot of research, but I also know that you're also kind of a collector. So I'm going to shift focus a little bit from kind of your professional background and go a little bit into your personal thing, because I know that you're a collector, but I don't really know what you collect. So I'm curious, like, how do you collect? Do you collect by localities or species or size or color? Is it kind of a specific collection, an overall systematic? Tell us a little bit about the way that you collect, and let's talk about your own personal collection for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to start off by saying that collecting has been so important to me in my professional life as well. Like, I would not be anywhere near as good at my job if I didn't collect and I didn't have an eye for minerals. And of course, I'm still very much learning, but I'm not starting from zero. And that has been so important. I think that collecting it's not just like a hobby, but it's very much like an intellectual pursuit. And we all love to learn about our specimens, regardless of if we collect for aesthetics or systematically. So I just want to really underscore the personal value that I hold in my collection, just as a learning and teaching tool.
Well, I think you make a really good point. I know with the mineralogical record, I believe this is still kind of the guideline. I know it used to be, but if you want to work for the mineralogical record, you have to be a collector. You are not allowed to work for the MinRec if you are not a collector. And I think it's very much for the same reasons, because if you collect, you have a certain perspective, you have a certain passion, you have a certain understanding that lends well into what the MinRec does, which is document and communicate. So I think it's a common thing, but it's a very, very good point that you bring up.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's a must. Like, there are a lot of exceptional mineralogists that don't have collections the way that a lot of mineral collectors might view it, but instead might have like research focused collections. And my collection is a bit of a mashup between things that inspire me scientifically, but also things that just underlie my initial fascination with minerals just as objects of beauty and intrigue. So I'd say overall, the type of collector that I am, if we're going to get into like big boxes, is I'm systematic, but I'm not purely systematic in that, like, I don't really see the need to get every single species of like monazite, for example. I don't need lanthanum monazite, cerium monazite. I would love a gadolinium monazite just because that's freaky, but I don't need every amphibole. But I do find the diversity of Earth's minerals to be something that's inspiring. And so I try to get as many different ones as I reasonably can, but I try to make sure that it's something that I can enjoy. And now I can enjoy something that is a grain mount if it's something that is just really rare or interesting. One I have here, and that there's no point in showing a photo, although you can find one on Mindat. I saw John Jazak posted in the chat. John very kindly gifted me a chip of the holotype of the extremely rare mineral richardsite. This is one that's personally significant to me. First of all, it's a very rare mineral. It's only been found on one specimen. There may be a potential second specimen from Sumeb, but really rare. It was gifted to me by a personal friend, and it's named after another personal friend, Pete Richards. So this is one that's like just super significant to me, and it's just a tiny grain mount. There's not much to visually appreciate, but it's something that is fascinating to me. How could something be so rare that it's only been found on one rock? But that story has been repeated like 100 times. There are a lot of minerals that have been found once. Some of them are just from a few crystals. So that's inspiring. But then there are also ones that are just inspiring because of their beauty. So I personally love this one. I sent you a photo of it. This is the Braunite.
Let's see. Okay, I think it is. Oh, here we go.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a specimen of Braunite. I actually confirmed this with X-ray energy dispersive spectroscopy. And that's from South Africa, from the Kalahari manganese fields. And this is one that is just beautiful. It's really aesthetic. It's a huge crystal, actually, for the mineral generally, which is relatively widespread and common, but very rarely forms nice crystals. And so this is one that's just, it's aesthetic. It's visually very interesting. I've heard it compared to Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar, which I entirely agree with. Yeah. But it's also like just a great mineral specimen in general. So I collect things that just intrigue me, but overall, yeah, I'm a systematic collector in that I get tickled most by having a lot of rare minerals. And I have a lot of red arrow rocks in boxes. And this is actually I've been a systematic collector for a while. I think a lot of people start off by just trying to get a piece of everything. You know, when you're just first into minerals, you just like, I'll get that and that and that and that. And then you end up with a few things that you like, and then a lot of things that you're just kind of like, why did I buy this?
Yeah.
So,
Chris,
yeah.
let me roll it back for a second. You mentioned a grain mount for those for the piece that John Jazak, who's the director and curator of the A.E. Seaman Museum, fantastic museum. And if you're watching online, we've been posting all of these non-copper minerals from the museum. That would be surprising. But what do you mean by grain mount for those who may not be familiar with that?
Oh, yeah. So this is a single grain mounted on carbon tape. And the mineral itself, I think it's maybe like 50 microns. So a human hair depending on what hair type you have, is about 60 microns. And so this is the entire mineral specimen, and its longest dimension is smaller than the width of a human hair. It is really hard to see, even with like a magnifying glass.
That is incredible. Okay, so how lucky do you have to be to find such a small sample of a mineral and be able to identify that as a new mineral?
So that's happened to us a few times. A lot of it, like if the mineral itself is only that small, a lot of that's found in the scanning electron microscope. There's actually one over here to my right.
Okay, so now are you in your office? Is that where you are right now?
This is our new mineral laboratory. So this has two really important pieces of equipment for us. One was the scanning electron microscope, which uses electrons instead of light to image things. And that allows us to look at minerals that are really, really, really small. And we can also get chemical information off of it by measuring X-rays that come off of the sample when we bombard it with an electron beam. And then to the left, that is an X-ray diffractometer, specifically a single crystal X-ray diffractometer, which means it is specialized for solving crystal structures. And we use both of these tools together to identify minerals and looking for potentially new minerals. But something that small, like 50 microns, generally you would have to discover it in the scanning electron microscope. And a funny anecdote about that specific mineral, John discovered it while doing a class demonstration of the scanning electron microscope. So that must have been a
Come
very special
on.
experience for those students. Yeah.
Oh, that is great. And I think that's got to be your favorite room in the entire museum.
Yeah, definitely it's a good one. We have a room upstairs that's full of incredible mineral specimens though in our systematic collection. So yeah, it's a tough call, but
Yeah, I could
it's
imagine.
nice.
So, I know that you found a bunch of new minerals that you had mentioned. And as a systematic collector, you ended up doing a real deep dive into the story behind many of the mineral names. And you are actually the first person I've talked to who has identified a particular tendency when it comes to naming minerals. Let's talk about that for a second. What is the process of naming a mineral?
Yeah. So mineral names have always been chosen by the authors. There are some times where you're kind of slotted into a mineral name. So some mineral groups have like preordained naming. So if you find, like a new monazite, for example, and you
Mm-hmm.
find one that has like a different rare earth element dominant, you have to name it monazite, with that. It's called a Levinson modifier. But apart from those situations where you're kind of like locked in, you as the author have reign over what you can name a mineral. There are some names that are unacceptable because they're like, it's too close or identical to a previously used mineral name where it would cause confusion in the literature. Um, but for the most part, you can name it whatever you want. It just has to be approved by I think 2/3 majority by what is known as the Commission for New Minerals, Nomenclature, and Classification, which is a commission of the International Mineralogical Association.
Mm-hmm.
So, provided that you've picked an acceptable name, it should get through no problem. It's rather uncommon for names to get voted down just because people don't like them. But minerals have been named for a lot of different things throughout history. Many of the earliest mineral names that survive to this present day relate to physical properties
Okay.
of minerals. Some of them are from like old mining terms. It wasn't until the late 18th century, I think it was 1788 or 1789, when a mineral was first named after a person, and it was named after the Dutch Colonel Hendrik von Pren. So that was Prenite.
Right.
That was the first ever mineral named after a person. We also name minerals after places where they're found. So there's like sumabite, there's footminite,
Mm-hmm.
ones like that. Minerals are also named for like somewhat arbitrary reasons. There's a really fun one, irigonite, which was just completely made up. The author just liked the sound of the name. It doesn't have any sort of meaning. There are other ones. There's olympite that was named for the Olympic Games in I think like 1980 something. So there are some kind of off the wall ones, but for the most part, more than half of all minerals are named after people.
More
And
than
that's
half of
actually,
all minerals are
yep,
named after people. Is that, did I hear you correct?
more than, yes, more than half of all minerals. And more than half of all minerals are named after a specific type of person, which you had alluded to. So more than half of all minerals are named after men. Like we ran the numbers, and this isn't something that I got into to go into like a crusade. I was just legitimately really interested because
Right.
I had been looking up minerals for my systematic collection, and Mindat, my favorite website, has a lot of photos of people that they're named after, and I was just noticing that a lot of them kind of like looked the same. They looked like me, more or less. And so I was just thinking, yeah, that's definitely changed over time. There are now more minerals named after women. But I was interested, can I go back in history and see how this has evolved to not just understand the past, but also to get a look into the future? So that was the idea. It wasn't,
Okay.
I'm going to get these numbers and go make a bunch of people mad and start a fight. I was just really interested because it's changed over time. And if we look at the past, you can use some math to look at the future. So we did that. And that was where the like really surprising thing happened. So I was under the impression, I think a lot of people are under the impression that progress has gone like that. And that,
Right.
we can look at a point in the future where things will be more equal. That's not true. It turns out, just based on the data that we have so far, and it's actually funny because the limited number of women with minerals named after them is one, the thing that we're interested in, but also makes it really hard to look at it really robustly because there are very few data compared to the men. So there are about 160 women with minerals named after them, and there are over 2,700 or 2,500 men with minerals named after them. So it gets
Wow.
really hard to like robustly look at things. But anyway, we were able to make some trends, smooth it out. And it turns out, and this is a big surprise, we've actually made little to no progress in the last 20 years. So that we've hit a ceiling of about 10% of a given year, like minerals that are named after people. About 1 in 10 will be for a woman versus a man.
Now, Chris,
And that's not changed.
has that spiked in the past, meaning it's gone up and now it's come down, or has it gone up and now plateaued?
Gone up and plateaued. So
Okay.
the data are really spiky just because, sorry, the lights keep going out. Just because, again, there are very few, like each year has at most like 3, maybe 4 women that get a mineral named after them. And so when you're looking at a trend like that versus like 50 men for the last, 20 or 30 years or so, the data are really spiky. But again, we can mathematically smooth it out. And when you do that, it's what's called a sigmoidal curve, it's got 2 asymptotes. One is 0. The other one is about 10.5. So that tells us this is our current ceiling, and that apparently we will not get better than 10.5% on average year on year.
Well, we will not
So that was
get better if we
fascinating.
don't do anything about it, but now being aware of it is the
Exactly.
first step.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and
that
in
that
my
was
intro, I like to make it very clear because there has a lot of misperception about Mineral Talks Live, and they assume it's a Blue Cap Productions endeavor, which it is not. Blue Cap Productions is only 1/3 of the group that makes up Mineral Talks Live, and it's been that way from the very beginning. So I've made a point to mention that Mineral Talks Live is a majority female owned endeavor. It is Raquel, Eloise, and myself, and I am the minority, and I'm very proud of that fact to help raise awareness, kind of like what you're
Yeah.
talking about when it comes to mineral names.
Yeah, and as a side note, what's really encouraging, so since I'm in the Young Mineral Collectors now on the
Mhm.
leadership, we actually have access to some of the demographics from our Facebook group, and that is way more equitable than 10%. I think we're
Really,
getting closer to 40%
I
women,
love
like
that. One
to
that
two
is
percent
fantastic news.
non-binary. Yeah,
So
yeah. So
40% of the
yep.
young mineral collectors are identify as female.
Yes, yeah,
Oh, that is
and
great.
that's actually improved significantly in the last 5 or so years since the beginning of the Facebook group. We've gotten closer to parity. So that gives us hope that if we can do this with young collectors and get people interested, that this will trickle up, and
Yeah.
later that there will be more representation in the field. It's not necessarily about the mineral names. It's why, when minerals have nothing to do with gender, why is there a gender gap here? So I
Well,
didn't do this
but
research to say, oh, this is the reason. Just want to talk about it.
yeah, but Chris, it may not even trickle up. I think it's to try to enforce change on people is a very difficult thing. But
Yeah.
what you're suggesting is if you're at near parity right now, you don't have to try to trickle up. All you have to do is sustain. And in time, you guys are going to be the ones who are running the mineral world. I mean, I'm 56. I'm already like aged out of the young mineral collectors, and I'm already kind of considered one of the older people. But the new people that are coming in, and that's why in the introduction I said you're an excellent representation of what the mineral world is becoming. All you have to do is maintain, and you've got that perspective, you have it on your radar. You know, it's gonna reach parity, but you just need to give it time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just really hope that this work can start a conversation and that we can just, yeah, talk about it and say, okay, whatever we've done in the past, all the efforts that we've put into recruitment have only gotten us so far in terms of representation, because I'm getting a mineral named for you is really sort of generally a later career thing. The average age of someone when they get a mineral named after them is about 60. So you've got a few years, Brian.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's about 59 or so for men. Yeah, so you can expect it in about 3 years. But yeah, it's like 62 to 63 for women.
Okay.
So it's generally
well, if I get a mineral named after me, I'm going to insist that it's Brianna Swoboda.
Yeah.
Hey, let's take a look at, I know we've been doing a lot of talking and it's been fantastic. And like I said yesterday, we could go on multiple hours doing this, but let's look at some minerals. You brought some great pieces from the Carnegie collection that have stories behind them. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you talk about rocks shocking us.
So I'll start off with one of my personal favorites, which I just only recently discovered in our museum drawers. I don't have a better photo of it. So this just looks like a piece of driftwood, honestly, and it looks similar to that in real life, almost like a gold aura-coated driftwood. But this is a Sonarmentite and Goethite pseudomorph, partial pseudomorph after stibnite from China. And this is right now, I believe, a one-of-a-kind specimen. There's a second smaller one that was found, but it was destroyed for powder diffraction and other analysis. So what I love about this one is like the stibnite kind of goes and bends. It's really like crooked, again, just like looks like driftwood. And so that's always been really fascinating to me, how stibnite, which is a really brittle mineral, it looks like it was malleable at some point. And so this is, I believe, just from defects during growth. Like this, it wasn't like melted and wiggled around or anything like that. It just seems to have formed like that. But just a really fascinating and unusual specimen. And it looks just like wood in real life. So I'm not a huge fan of pseudomorphs, but that one just so bizarre.
How did you guys acquire that piece?
That was purchased in the 1990s. I'm not sure exactly from who. There's a label, there's a Schlepp label.
Oh, yeah. Just Gene Schlepp.
Yeah. So it was probably where it was acquired, because I was under the impression that it was bought by the museum shortly after the discovery. So there's a really interesting one. So we've all seen a bunch of these. Mm-hmm. And how old do you think the specimen is?
You mean how long it's been out of the ground, or how long since it's been formed?
How long since it's been out of the ground?
Oh, I'd say within the last decade.
This is from 1885.
Come on.
So this is a Crystal Peak Amazonite with a William W. Jeffress label from 1885. So the Jeffress collection is the foundational collection of our museum. Andrew Carnegie purchased it from W.W. Jeffress in 1904, and that was the mineral collection that started the museum. And Jeffress had been collecting minerals since the 1840s, and he died in, I think, late 1800s, early 1900s, and his collection was purchased by Carnegie. And there are a lot of really classic minerals, old and rare things. I'll show you a couple of them shortly.
Let me comment on that. That's incredible because usually we see a lot of iron staining, and especially from the older pieces, maybe they didn't have the technology to remove the iron staining as much as we do today. That piece looks like something that Tim Doris just cleaned within the last few years.
Yeah. So I had that same question if it was recently cleaned by iron staining, but there's an old painted label on the back, and I would imagine that that might have gotten stained or messed with if it was put in like super iron out or muriatic acid or something like that. So we don't know exactly when and how this one was cleaned, but it is remarkable that it has the history that it does while looking like an otherwise contemporary piece.
Absolutely. That is great.
Yeah, another one that is really historic, 1861. Let me try to get out. I think there's no original label for this one, but almandine from Bishop's Mill in Pennsylvania, 1861.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, this is the finest Bishop's Mill garnet that known. It's been figured at least once. I don't remember exactly which issue. But what's really fascinating about this and the next two pieces I'll show you is that they were exhibited by Jeffress at the 1876 World's Fair in Philadelphia, which was the first World's Fair held on American soil. So Jeffress exhibited his collection there, and that included this piece as well as two that I'm about to show you.
I love it. What history. And it really comes back to the value of a museum and the history that is locked up in a museum if it's properly curated and recorded. I mean, absolutely incredible.
Here's another extremely antique wave-a-light. This one is probably from the 1860s or 1870s as well, because this one was also exhibited at the same World's Fair. But yeah, that is a Pennsylvania wave-a-light from the General Trimble's mine, which is not a locality that I was very familiar with before I started at the museum. Looks totally unlike any of the Pennsylvania wave-a-lights that you probably have seen.
Okay, let me ask you this, Chris. Do you take any of those specimens and have them professionally cleaned, or is that as it's been in the collection for 100 years or 200 years?
So this one also has a water it is water damaged, but it's a paper label it's been water damaged a little bit, but it's antique, probably was applied to the specimen in the 19th century. And so this one hasn't been cleaned very aggressively, if at all, in a really, really long time.
Wow.
So it's just kept in excellent condition because it's in a museum drawer away from the dust. We do have things professionally cleaned from time to time or professionally prepped, but a lot of that is done before we get the specimen, like the prepping. Gotcha. And so the cleaning for really antique pieces, we might just avoid that to avoid damaging some of the historical information, unless it's something that we plan on displaying. In which case there might be some cleaning, but again, special precautions. We air dust the things that are in our display cases. Sure. I got to do that a few months ago, which was awesome. Like I'd seen the minerals in the display cases for months since starting there, but I got to take them out and handle them and look at them at all these different angles. And we were carefully dusting them with brushes and air dusters.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
So, when is the Carnegie going to exhibit at the TGMS?
We'll be exhibiting this year. So we'll be exhibiting a lot of Pennsylvania minerals. And one more that's really fascinating. Actually, two more. The other one's kind of just a little funny story. But Kansas, the tennessite on calcite. So this is a really good example of this. It doesn't have a very historic label. So it's from the Mid-Continent mine. And so, yeah, this is just really exceptional for the staining of the copper-bearing mineral tennessite, which is pretty rare. but then it's hollow on the inside, which is just extra fascinating, even though it looks like it was cleaved by the miner off of the wall. So I don't know how it would have gotten hollowed out from the inside. Just a really unusual object, in addition to just being a really fine example of this rare find.
You know, that is one of the benefits of being able to handle a mineral, because if you just saw that on display, you'd never see that it was hollow inside.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, last one. So it's not the most aesthetic specimen, but it's got a little bit of a funny story. So this was acquired by Jeffress in the 1860s. He bought it from William S. Vaux, who was the uncle of George Vaux, for which Vauxite was named. It's really well known from Bolivia, from Yayagua. And the specimen came and it broke during shipping. And so there's like correspondence between Jeffress and Vaux where he was like, hey, can you like refund me or something? Like the specimen broke during shipping. And so he repaired it in 1865.
Wow.
And then, it was re-repaired, but because the glue that they put on there really didn't last. So if anyone has had a specimen broken in shipping, it's a tale much older than the age of the internet, that's for sure. It's been happening to people for a very long time.
So people who are getting upset when you're ordering minerals online and they're showing up broken, nothing new.
Nothing new.
Dynamite. All right. Well, we've just hit the 1 hour mark, and I know that I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions, but I'm going to switch to the quick fire 5 segment of the program right now. And are you familiar with what this is?
Yeah. I've done a couple of them before. I never score very high.
Okay. Well, this show, you're going to score 100% because all of your questions are correct. I'm sorry. I don't even think we've launched the poll. Let's go ahead and launch the poll. And then let's take, I've got some photos I can share of your personal collection. Why don't we do that? So Raquel or Eloise will launch the poll. When it shows up on your screen, Chris, go ahead and close that out. In the meantime, you and I will talk about some of these pieces from your personal collection.
Yeah. So I just collected that in October, and we just confirmed the identity of it a few weeks ago. That is an extremely rare specimen of the mineral bobfinchite, which is just recently discovered. It's the sodium analog of the uranium mineral metashopite. So the bobfinchite is sort of a gemmier jelly like yellow stuff. The pale yellow up front is metateuomunite, and then there's some gypsum overgrowing the bobfinchite. That's only the second time this mineral has ever been found, and these are some of the largest known bobfinchite crystals. Wow. So that was really special. When we saw it on the wall, we were like, that's definitely something interesting, but we have no idea what it is. So it was really fun to get it back to the lab and analyze it, and then go through the journey of discovery and finding out this is certainly really special. It's one of the world's finest specimens of this extremely rare mineral. That is from the Hubbard mine.
What's the field of view about? Like, how big is it?
So that's maybe like 9 millimeters or so. I've uploaded that to Mindat, so you can pull up the field of view from Mindat. It's about a centimeter for the field of view.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Maybe a little bit more.
Fantastic. I love that. Not very common that you get such bright yellow minerals in the mineral collecting world. So this is a great piece to see. Let's move on to this next one, and these are somewhat random.
Yeah, so that is a thumbnail specimen of jurlite. It's a copper sulfide. That is from the Mount Elliot mine in Queensland, Australia, which is one of these iron oxide copper gold deposits that is I had studied for my PhD research. And when I was down there in Australia getting samples for research, we connected with this old collector. He was an old like diesel pipe fitter, and he got in really good with all the miners at these places, and so they would let him in and collect minerals. And he had some really unique things that no one else had because he was the one who went and collected all of it. And he was a really an aficionado of minerals from his home area. So he didn't really let things go. But I was really lucky enough that he's getting older and he contacted me a couple of years ago and was like, okay, I'm ready to let a few things go. You'd expressed interest in these. So if you want to come and buy them off of me, we can arrange that. So I went back to Australia, mostly to visit friends, but this definitely didn't hurt. And I got the Ernest Henry minerals off of him. I got a lot of really rare things from these deposits that I had studied when I was a PhD student. So I was really geeking out. But I had gotten this, and it was labeled chalcocite, and he had collected it and didn't really know what it was. And I x-rayed it, and it's actually like one of the finest jurleites probably found in Australia. Just super sharp. It's a nice twin. It's got a very interesting growth patterns all over the surface. I also like it because I collect like morphological thumbnail crystals. So this one just went right, slotted into my thumbnail collection.
Now, Chris, did you x-ray that because it seemed odd, it wasn't a chalcocite, or because that's just your standard operating procedure for anything that enters your collection?
Oh no, I really only x-ray things where I'm like, there's a chance that this is maybe something a little unusual. And the shape just bothered me because I had quite a few chalcocites from him and from a lot of different places in the world. It's one of these minerals that I kind of have an affection for. And the shape just looked so odd. I was like, I've never seen a chalcocite that really had this sort of wedge shape, but I think I've seen a jurlite that had a shape similar to this. So I x-rayed it, and sure enough, it was jurlite.
Nice.
So yeah, I think I paid like $5 for it or something, which was actual
bargains
theft.
are still out there, people.
Yeah, you just have to go to Outback Australia and find old diesel pipe fitters and befriend them.
But that's part of the story. That's part of the allure of this hobby. And to John Jazak's earlier comment on the chat here, yeah, minerals is really not a hobby anymore, but it is a term that we still use to describe this this world that we're in. Chris, let's talk about this one, this calcite.
Yeah, so another place that I have an affection for is my home state of New York, and that's because of my influence from Steve Chamberlain, obviously, who is the New York collector. What I love about this is technically a single crystal of calcite for the most part. There are like a couple little satellite crystals, but certainly that largest gemmy calcite is the same crystal, atomically speaking, as the whole large one, which is the scalenahedron. One of many actual scalenahedral forms that calcite has. There's not just one, which you may or may not have known. But that's really fascinating to me because what happened that the habit and clarity and everything just completely changed. And then it started growing nice gemmy crystals. There's also a coating of marcasite. But yeah, it's from New York. It's a unique specimen, I was told, from the find, although there are calcites that exhibit a similar pattern in the scalenahedron being overgrown by these like gemmy hexagonal prismatic crystals from the Greeley area in Ontario, from like a Grant quarry specifically. So you can see there, those have like blood red scalenahedral calcite overgrown by this gemmy, hexagonal prismatic calcite. So this is just a really fascinating piece for the crystallography of it. Plus, it's from New York and it photographed beautifully. So
fantastic. Okay, I'm only going to share two more before we go on to the quick fire 5 because we are running over time here. But hey, it's worth it. Everybody's loving this.
Yeah, so that's an exceptional thumbnail of Bakitaite from the Foot Mine in North Carolina. There's actually one giant, like 3+ centimeter crystal that's running down the center, but it kind of gets like taken over by a bunch of other Bakitaite crystals and some other gunk towards the bottom. But that's just really nice, really aesthetic.
Gunk is the professional mineralogical term, right?
Gunk. Yeah, I also use the term goopify a lot because some of the post mining
okay.
stuff that we collect turns to goop.
All right.
If you
Hey,
don't
these are
store
the
it
terms
properly.
if you want to work for Carnegie.
Yeah, but I also kind of like Bakitaite because there's some fun science that was written about it where it technically has what's called one-dimensional ice that are all these water molecules that connect like that, like make a chain infinitely
Wait.
throughout the crystal.
Let's cut back to your camera while you describe that again, because I could see you, but the viewers couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. So Bakitaite is a zeolite mineral, so it has a framework silicate structure, and in that framework, there's what is called, or has been called, more like sensationally, one-dimensional ice, and that there are these water molecules. So water is like a V-shaped molecule, and so these water molecules kind of like connect. So they're hydrogen bonded. So the hydrogen is a positive charge, and the oxygen is a negative charge, and so there's a weak attraction between them. And so they're kind of bonded like this in this infinite chain. And since it's a chain, it only has one dimension length. And it's because it's a solid water, they call it one-dimensional ice. This is kind of like funny, but also Bakitaite, just a cool mineral. It's a lithium zeolite. You can have exceptional crystals from the Foot mine, as well as the Bakita pegmatite at the type locality. So I just really like that one. It's an excellent Bakitaite thumbnail.
Right on. Okay, final piece we're going to cover here is this linerite, and you have so many others that I'd love to share, but we are pressed.
Understandable. This is the best mineral specimen I've ever collected, like aesthetically and all that.
Wait,
so
you collected?
Here it is.
You personally
right
collected this?
Yes, I personally collected that on a field trip in 2018 with John Rackavan at the Blanchard mine in New Mexico.
No
and
way.
I found this.
Let's cut to Chris's camera.
Yeah. So I collected this 15 minutes after we stepped foot in the mine. We actually were only collecting for like an hour and a half. So I found this almost immediately, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'm kind of done. Not that I stopped collecting, but after that, I helped other people, other students, just like kind of find cool stuff and all that. And again, I'm not a huge pseudomorph aficionado, so maybe this is wasted on me, but this is just a really interesting for the geological story that it tells. So these are double pseudomorphs, and what that means is that the mineral has been replaced twice. So this started life as a galena, which is why it's cube-shaped. That got replaced by anglicite and cerussite. So anglicite is lead sulfate, cerussite is lead carbonate. And then that, in turn, was overgrown by linerite, which is lead copper sulfate. And the rock that it's on has also been replaced. So this rock started life as like a marine limestone. And then it was completely replaced by acidic quartz-bearing water and completely turned to quartz. So it's a double pseudomorph on a pseudomorph.
Oh my God.
I mean, how many more pseudomorphs do you want?
Yeah.
From New Mexico. Yep.
I know that Erin Delventhal would probably, she'd sacrifice one of her cats for that.
Yeah.
And you know what I love? That it was self-collected, and it was the mineralogical version of a mic drop. You collected it and just dropped the rock pick. I'm done. Walk out.
Yeah.
And was John upset that it wasn't an apatite?
No. John and I found plenty of apatite the next year, so I don't think he felt too sore about it. He got the best one too. It was fitting because he's the apatite guy, but we drew cards, and whoever had the highest card got the first pick. And there was one way obviously better apatite, kind of similar to this one. It's a little bit nicer. And that was like obviously the best piece that we had found in like a few days of collecting. And so he's like, yeah, I'll just take that. And then I got the second highest, and I hadn't even thought about what rock I wanted by that point, because we were all just fixated on the really good one. So yeah.
Chris, who was holding the cards when you picked the cards?
Ray McDougall, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think he had the lowest one, so he definitely didn't rig it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Chris, thanks for the indulgence. We're going to go on to the quickfire 5. For all you viewers out there, question number 5 on the poll was actually that was a leftover from our last one. So I'm going to do the question number 5 live, and all of you viewers have to chime in before Chris answers. So we're going to do it just a little bit differently. So, Chris, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. And for those viewers who haven't seen this before, these are going to be 4 questions that have been put up that all of you have already guessed how Chris might answer. And Chris is going to give us his actual answers. All of his answers are correct. And we'll see how well all of you know Chris Emproto. I'm sorry, I keep trying to say Emproto.
Yeah, no, I don't know why. No one can pronounce my last name. I don't get it.
It's okay. It's the American. Right, it's the American pronunciation. Emproto.
Yeah.
Emproto.
That's right.
Emproto. Okay. Question number 1. Your favorite weekend activity: rock hunting or sunbathing by the beach?
Oh, man. It's got to be rock hunting. Unfortunately, I haven't lived near enough places to go rock hunting on a weekend easily. But whenever I travel, I center that travel around minerals and not around beaches. So that's why my answer is that.
Fair enough. Okay, question number 2. Favorite drink while in Tucson: beer or margarita?
Tucson has excellent margaritas, but a beer in Mineral City just hits differently. So I gotta say, having a beer specifically in Mineral City.
Love it. Okay. Are you going to be hanging out where are you going to be hanging out when you're in Tucson?
I'll be everywhere. I'm definitely coming to the Fine Mineral Gallery. I'll be at Mineral City. I'll be at the main show. I'll be around.
Perfect. All right. Good deal. Favorite place to collect minerals: Colorado or Sumeb?
Like collect minerals from? I mean, it's got to be Sumeb, just because it's got something for everyone. You know,
absolutely.
The price of Sumeb minerals has gotten egregious, but also there are just so many off the wall rarities and exceptional quality. They're beautiful examples of so many minerals. So it's just kind of hard to go wrong with Sumeb, as much as it really pains me every time I have to pay for a mineral from there.
I hear you. Okay, final question of the 4, and then we're going to do a live thing for number 5. I'm not quite sure. I'm kind of making this up as we go. Mineral name after person or chemistry? What is your preference?
Oh, yeah, chemistry.
Okay.
Yeah, it's informative. I'm a mineralogist. Fewer names to memorize if I can look at it and it's, ferro, whatever, instead of some other miscellaneous non-informative name.
Exactly. Okay. What I'm going to do now is, I don't know, is it Raquel or Eloise who's going to be doing the quickfire answers with me here?
Raquel is doing it.
Raquel. It looks like it's going to be Raquel. Let's go over these 4, and then we will do the final one as the tiebreaker if people have gotten 2 wrong and 2 right. So I think that makes sense. So question number 1, favorite weekend activity: rock hunting, sunbathing by the beach. Chris went with rock hunting, which was somewhat predictable. What did our viewers say, Raquel?
96% agree with him.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
I don't look very tan. I'm sure that's why.
It's quite clear.
Okay, question number 2. Favorite drink while in Tucson: beer or margarita? And even I wasn't quite sure as Chris started answering that question, but his final answer was beer. What did our viewers say?
Beer.
Okay.
I also used to homebrew. I haven't done it since I moved to Pittsburgh, but I used to make my own beer. So that's partly where that comes from.
All right. Well, hey, bring all the equipment to Mineral City and let's have a party, Mineral City style.
Nice.
Question number 3, favorite place to collect: Colorado or Sumeb? Somewhat painfully, Chris went with Sumeb. What did the viewers say?
The viewers thought like you, Brian, Colorado.
Okay. Question number 4. Minerals to be named after person or chemistry. Somewhat predictably, if you've been watching the show and paying attention, Chris went with chemistry. What did our viewers say?
So this is it was also my mistake when I was typing the answers of the question. So
Oh, you said person or collector.
yeah, so
Oh.
that was for the next one, and then the next one didn't change. But I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure people will have said chemistry. I think it was
Yeah,
quite clear
let's-
from the.
let's
so
give them
we,
the
we give that one as a winner for our guests, for our
Okay.
viewers.
All right. So the majority, for the majority of viewers, we have 3 correct answers, 1 incorrect answer. Now we're going to go for the Grand Slam question number 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question and the options. Chris, before you answer, I want to give the viewers a little bit of time to type in their answer directly into the chat. Raquel and Eloise, you have to try to somehow keep count of them, and then we're going to have Chris answer. Okay. So this is brand new, never been done before on Mineral Talks Live.
Chris,
And
don't read
honored.
the answer. Don't read the chat, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look away.
Chris,
I'll keep it
no
covered.
cheating. Why would he cheat? Okay. Future career path. So for you viewers, you're going to type in one of these 2 answers: researcher or collector. Go. Chris, we're just having fun as we often like to do. So, oh man, I just see that
Good
chat
luck,
going.
Raquel, to count.
I don't even think Raquel needs to count. I can just see it's the same answer and it's just scrolling like crazy on the
Gosh, this is.
screen.
I
So,
don't know.
Chris,
It looks like it could be a tie.
oh, really?
No, I think there is one a little
Yeah.
bit more than the other.
Okay, Chris, what is your answer? Future career path, researcher or collector?
Yeah, I really wanted to say them both. Like, I would love to continue
You
doing both
can't.
because my collection is, yeah, it's
You
like
can't. You have
my
to choose.
library.
The boss says you can't.
The boss says I can't. So if I had to, so I guess the question is if I had to pick one, research or collecting. Yeah, I have to say research because ultimately, if I was at a place where I couldn't like scratch that itch of needing to know what is this mineral, what is the chemistry of this, what's the structure of that, if I couldn't answer those questions, I would be miserable. Like I love that. I love analyzing minerals. I love getting these answers. And so if it comes down to it, I have to just pick the same thing I've been doing the whole time, which is just pursuing that passion, which is just knowing like why we have the minerals that we have, why our earth looks the way it does. So it's got to be research then.
I think it's pretty fair to say that the majority of people agreed with that final answer. I just saw researchers scrolling like crazy off the screen. So, Raquel, Eloise, is that fair to say that we're going to give it to the
Oh,
viewers?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
So,
We also want Chris on this side of the
Yes, exactly.
of this side of the pond, right?
You're looking to 2 researchers here, so of course we're
Exactly
going to
right.
researchers anyway.
4 out of 5. Okay. Raquel, Eloise, what kind of Q&As? What kind of, what am I thinking? Yeah, Q&A. I'm having a brain fart already. Any questions that our viewers want to ask Chris, either that came from the chats or were entered directly into the Q&A?
I think that from the chats, the questions were answered as we were going. From what I saw, like Raquel was answering and people were answering to each other. So I think we got that covered pretty much, unless I'm wrong. So people, if you have still questions, put them in the Q&A section if we missed anything. The one that appear right now in the chat is, how far are you in your PhD? Well,
Done.
you're done.
Yeah, I graduated in May and I started working for the museum in May.
So that's why you're called a postdoctoral researcher, because it's after the PhD. Okay, so back to the first Q&A that we have. Evan Molidor was asking, did you design your own mineral catalog? That was at the very beginning of the interview.
Yeah. So I started cataloging my minerals when I was maybe a freshman or sophomore in high school. And I was just like, at this point, I'm starting to spend at that point serious money, $25, like $50 maybe as a splurge on minerals. So I should just keep track of what I have, where everything is from, the other notes that I have. Because when I had like purchased things, sometimes it would say like there'd be some details about maybe when it was collected or some other information. And so I just wanted to keep track of that. And so I started doing that in like a Word document. And then later on, I was like, I really want to work with these data. And so I transferred that into like a Excel workbook. And now I can run like a Python script and find out how many mineral species I have, or how many species from like certain people's collections, or how many minerals I have from certain people's collections, or scarily how much I've spent on minerals in some years. But I just like working with the data, so that's why I've done that. I'd highly recommend keeping a catalog to anyone, no matter what level of collecting you're at. It is easier to start when you have very few things than when you have thousands. So it's never too early to start a catalog.
Always the first recommendation to a collector, especially entering the dates that you received it, the date it was collected, the price even. That's really interesting to know as well. Okay, I had a question I didn't really understood. Maybe you got it more than me. This Liz would be interested to know, I guess, in what percentage of female mineral specimen enthusiasts is scientifically interested in minerals? Do you have I don't think we will be able to answer that question. From her experience at shows and clubs, the percentage is very low. So I think she's talking about female researchers, I guess.
Yeah, so it's really difficult to get information on this because part of the problem is that the N is very low. I was reading a paper that was looking at the gender distribution in different areas of geology, and mineralogy was categorized as other because there was one person that was included in that study. And so because the numbers are so small, it's really hard to like get good statistics. And then what's the significance of one person other than that's just way too low?
Yeah.
So it's hard to get really good information on that other than, again, we need to do something about it because obviously there's a huge gender gap for reasons we could talk about for weeks.
Yeah.
Chris, I find it really interesting what the young mineral collectors is bringing to our eyes. Because I think prior to the YMC, there may have existed the question, are there really enough women out there that are interested in the mineral collecting world, if you will? And just because of the inclusivity and the ease of access to a group like the Young Mineral Collectors, we're looking at, I think you said 40% reach, very close to parity. So I think that answers the question that, there are a lot more women out there than we realize. And the Young Mineral Collectors has created an environment that maybe empowers them or emboldens them. I'm not quite sure what the right word is, but it has allowed them to be recognized and to be seen. And for me, I think that's one of the most important things that the Young Mineral Collector group has ever done. And you guys are now a nonprofit organization. And, we generally keep this free of any commercial thing. But I think anybody out there watching the show, if you believe in what the YMC is doing, consider making a donation to the group. Tax deductible, consider that. So, keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
A follow-up question, that's for us. How many women are viewing the lecture, this talk today? So I think we can crunch the data and we'll let you know next time. It's a really good question.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. That'd be very interesting to see.
But yeah, we are not able to answer it as we go. Richard Stata is interested to know what is the largest specimen you've collected from, largest apatite specimen you've collected from Ontario and Quebec.
This was the size of a brick, and obviously they get much larger. You saw the photo of that one that you can't put your arms all the way around. Just like that was awesome to see. But the largest one I personally pulled out of the ground, yeah, it was about the size of a brick. Unfortunately, it kind of looked like a brick too. But that's on our windowsill. But it was still incredible to pull that out of the ground and just like. And a side note, what's really interesting about that is that there are a lot of indications that these crystals formed like really fast. So again, it's like you're growing something like that in a really short period of time. It's just an incredible geological story that you're able to hold in your hand.
And when you say fast, how fast? Because that's the follow-up question people usually ask me.
Yeah, so we can't say exactly like, oh, this took 3 days and 5 hours, but there are indications that the supersaturation happens really quickly, particularly because the type of magma that these are in, it's a carbonate magma instead of like a silicate magma. Silicate, as any people who have been in like intro geology class, that's very sticky. That's why like when a volcano erupts, it's like goopy and viscous. But carbonate, when that's molten, it doesn't link together the way that silicate does. And so it's not viscous or goopy. It's like hot maple syrup. It just, fires through fractures in the crust. And so because it's like not really viscous, you can move things around really fast. And crystal growth is a function of time and how fast you can move things. So you can make big crystals in like a batholith, like just a big body of magma sitting underneath the ground by letting it cool for like hundreds of thousands of years. Like that will it's a sticky magma, but you've given it time to have things move around and like grow big crystals. Or if you have a medium, like a magma where things can zip around really fast, which happens in granitic pegmatites, that's how you're able to grow like spodumene crystals the size of a school bus. That magma, because it's not sticky, things zip around. You can grow giant crystals in way less time, a fraction of the time. And so it's really based on a lot of the textures, that it's really chaotic. There's a lot of disequilibrium textures, things that started and didn't finish. There are a lot of where you'll see like fractures where the melt like went in and just like chewed up the rock. So it just seems to be a very like quick and chaotic environment. There are also large crystals that are in this melt that should, if it sat for a while, should have all gravitationally settled out. Mm-hmm. And so for them to still be locked in there and showing these flow textures, the crystallization had to happen really fast because, again, otherwise they're dense enough that they all would have sank to the bottom and you would just have huge veins of like just barren calcite and not have anything in the middle of it. So it had to happen relatively quickly, maybe on the order of like years or so, or months in some cases, depending on like how large something was. But that's just like a complete guess. But it's not hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years or something to grow crystals the size of dinner plates.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the answer. A follow-up question by Richard is like, during your collecting, did you like the bugs?
Sorry, one more time.
During your collecting, did you like the bugs? That was Richard's follow-up question.
Oh, do I like insects?
The insects, yes.
No, I've never really been much of a fan of bugs. I didn't really like living things. Like things I was interested in, I had like a couple pets, but things I was most interested in were like shells, teeth, like dead animals, dead animal parts, and like rocks and minerals, of course. Just because I really don't care for the squishy stuff. I hate dissections. I would be the person that studied the diagram, and I'd be like holding the paper in front of my face while the other people cut the gizzard out of the worm. I hated all of that. So unfortunately, you need a really good understanding of all the fine workings, the goopy parts, in order to work with animals like meaningfully, even dinosaurs and whatnot. So that was out. You know,
I feel
yeah,
you. I did 6 months of biology before switching to geology. It was like we had to do it, because it was like the first 6 months, like biology and geology were together. I just hated it. The same reason.
Yeah, I could not do it.
All right. I think that Raquel answered one of the questions about your research on mineral names, if it was published somewhere. You put that in the chat, Raquel, right?
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's published in the American Mineralogist, so it's slated for the February issue. It's available online as the author corrected pre-proof, so you can go and you can read the full paper right now, but it will be finalized and typeset and some of the typos and whatnot removed, and then it will be published in February, so that probably around the time of the show.
Perfect.
So
perfect timing.
pretty pertinent. Yeah.
So if you're online right now, scroll up to that link that Raquel posted in the chat. Click on it. As soon as we're done with the show, that link's going to go away. So take a look at it now. Gender in mineral names. So interesting, co-written with a bunch of our friends, and Raquel being one of them.
Howard had a question. Does iron isotope ratio in banded iron formation indicates origin?
So I've actually been looking into this a lot recently because one of these iron oxide copper gold deposits in Australia appears to have started life as a banded iron formation, and then it just got overprinted. So what I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about that is that this is something that we thought mattered. Where does the iron come from? Where do these metals come from? And it turns out it may not matter that much, and that you can start off with a banded iron formation. You can start off with like some other massive amount of magnetite or hematite or something and end up with an iron oxide copper gold deposit. So I've been looking into these banded iron formations, and there are some iron isotope ratios that are thought to indicate like certain types of biological activity. You can find these if you look on Google Scholar, like iron isotopes, banded iron formations. Banded iron formations actually have a huge range of iron isotope values because there are a lot of different processes that can act like when you involve life or something else that's really like energy conservative. You can get some pretty weird isotope ratios because it can be very selective. Like if you drink only heavy water, you'll die because your body is like really lazy. And so it only wants to expend the energy that it needs to work with like regular water. But if you only drink heavy water, those bonds are stiffer and they're stronger, and you need to expend more energy to break them and like digest your food or like use that water in the body. So like heavy water is toxic. So that's an isotope difference. And so when you have iron isotopes, that you could have similar things happening where life can be very selective. It's like, okay, I'm not going to worry about this one, or I can't break this bond with my enzyme, So you can get really wacky isotope ratios when you involve life, and banded iron formations involve life, the great oxidation event, et cetera. So there's just a lot of complicating factors, which is partly why they've been studied so long and continue to be studied to reveal information about what we're able to do right now, and that enables us, which is breathing and the living in the environment that we have. So
thanks for the comment, Joanne. Light beers only, Chris. That's what he's saying.
Okay. Yeah, I actually mostly was brewing light beers. My specialty was a date flavored pale ale. That was the Mineral House brew. You make that face, but delicious. I highly recommend it.
We have the best IPAs in the country, in this side of the coast. So I'm very sorry. I have to go with an IPA if I will have a fight with you.
That's because you haven't had the date beer.
I love dates, don't get me wrong, but not in my beer.
Have you tried one?
No.
The date flavor completely transforms, because a lot of what you taste when you eat a date is sugar, and the yeast love that, so they eat all the sugar, and what you're left with is just this really complex, like not like it's just deep. I don't know how to describe it. I will say it's indescribable, so I can get off the hook for describing it, other than saying it's good.
Okay, so you're going to have that available for anyone who comes visits the Stope over at Mineral City.
I wish. I haven't brewed that in a little while. I have to get my brewing setup going again here in Pennsylvania. Kind of took things apart, put it in storage, and haven't really put it back together since moving.
Guys, I hate to be.
Yes. Do you want to move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Quickly.
Raquel was trying to end the show, but no, go on with the next
It's
question.
2:27. I need to go.
Were you at the Miller property in Ontario, I guess, right?
Yep.
John is asking the question. Okay. Yes. Perfect. Next question. Yep. Was that New Mexico photo you showed early on the Harding pegmatites?
Oh, that was in the Blanchard mines. That was really close, maybe 15 feet away from where I collected the linerite pseudomorph.
Okay. And has any work been done with gold isotopes? David Mustard is asking.
With gold isotopes?
Yeah, gold isotopes.
Gold is monoisotopic. So unfortunately, gold isotopes are not very interesting.
See, easy questions, Raquel. Would you please put your email address? Okay, so are you okay to share your email address with us or not?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so you can share my Carnegie Museum email address, or my University of Michigan email address is still active. So either of those are good to reach me.
Okay, I'll let you guys do that. And we're done with the questions. Thank you so much, Chris. That was amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Tucson around the beer something.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm really honored to be a guest on Mineral Talks Live. So thank you so much for.
Yeah, that was awesome to have you. I'm looking forward to the young collectors group as well. Like to see you guys. It's always a nice group of people. So yeah, Brian has something to say.
Hey, Chris, one final question for you.
Sure.
Who do you think described you as wickedly smart and fun dude?
That kind of sounds like something Cristofano.
Ooh, close. Tama Higuchi.
Tama Higuchi. All right.
Fair enough.
I thought you would have described me as I'm known affectionately in the Young Mineral Collectors group as Dr. Crust, because a lot of what I collect are like micro minerals. Yeah.
Dr. Crust. Okay.
Dr. Crust.
We've got a new
the Crust
name.
Collector.
All right. Well, Dr. Crust, thank you so much for joining us today. Fantastic interview. I think the description was dead on. Really enjoyed chatting with you and looking forward to meeting you in person in Tucson. First set of drinks are on me. For all you viewers out there, thank you for joining us today on our 94th show as we march down to 100. Next show is going to be February 5th. And that is going to be live from Tucson. So the three of us, it's one of the few shows every year. Usually it's the only show where the three of us are able to be in one place together where we do the Mineral Talks Live directly from the Blue Cat Production Studio.
Margaritas and beer.
And we're going to be having... No, come on. Mezcal.
Oh, I forgot.
Pensando. Hey, come on. Mezcal. And Ocolejao. Yeah. All right. So that's going to be February 5th. Make sure you tune in then. Until then, have a fantastic January. Look forward to seeing a bunch of you in Tucson. And Chris, thanks again for tuning in and being part of the show. Aloha, everyone.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.